Hey guys, this is it's crazy what I'm about to do, because I realized coming off of the last session we had where we read the doctor's description of the physical suffering of Jesus. Excuse me. I had all these put together and I was going to take them to Jeremy to be able to post, and I was about ready to do that when I realized, hold on. I was so caught up in that whole scene that I forgot to do the very thing. I forgot to go ahead and bring a summation to this whole process of this study that has been the most important thing to me through it all. Wow, how could I forget that? I don't know, but maybe that's why, you know, we need reminders that are so important, as Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 says, I want to remind you of the gospel. How in the world could you forget something so important? We're people, and we're weak, and we mess things up. And so I apologize that I have not culminated this thing that I've been leading up to the whole time. And so that's what I'm going to do for us in this session. I'm not even timing it. It may be short. I know it won't be long, but we've got to go there, because for me, this has really been the whole point. I've been telling you from the get-go. I believe Jesus' mental suffering was worse than his physical. And I know I've said that probably 100 times. And through the course of the study, we've talked about those things that started that and then built it along the way. His own hometown folks reject him. The religious leaders, the Pharisees, teachers of the law, the scribes and the elders, they just didn't get it, who he was. Either that, or they just wanted to reject him because they wanted their prominence and their power. But they had constantly at him throughout his ministry. His own disciples, you know, they sure didn't get it, after he told them numerous times exactly what was going to be happening. And they just missed it. I mean, to the very end of it all, they didn't understand what was happening. And so that's frustrating to him. We saw him as he's coming to Jerusalem for the last few days of his life on earth before his death. We saw his frustration reach a boiling point with the Pharisees. That would be chapter 23 of Matthew. And he just lets them have it with those 7 woes, using language very unlike him through most of his ministry. But it's just, he's to that point. He has this sorrowful moment at the end of chapter 23 of Matthew where he is so emotionally caught up in the Jews. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you have stoned the prophets and killed those sent to you. How often I've wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. Oh, he's hurting over that. He struggles over this scenario with Judas. We talked about that, how bad it was. He just watches him as he betrays him in the garden. There he is. Greetings, Rabbi. Oh, cut to the heart. And then, of course, the scene in the garden when Jesus is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Remember that? It's bad, and his disciples go to sleep. And just one thing after another is just building more and more and more. And then the so-called, the mockery of a trial begins, and the mocking that takes place, and the physical does begin, the physical abuse. And then we find him on the cross. Here's where I want you to grasp what I'm talking about. Of course, the physical is horrific, no question. But all of a sudden, Jesus finds himself in this place, and he says some things. When he says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Now, I hope I clarified. I'm sure I did. That doesn't mean, God turned away from him because he couldn't look on sin. No, of course not. The Father is right there through the whole thing. But here's what I want you to grasp, because I believe here's what happened in that moment. Do you remember where we first started in this study? You remember? Eternity. And what do we say about eternity? Well, remember, it doesn't just never end, right? It never began. There's no beginning, no end to eternity. And I made that point. We need to understand it. But here's why. God the Father and God the Son, the one we know as Jesus, they have been connected. They have been together eternity past. There was never a start to them, right? And it's always been them in the Spirit. They've always been together. Eternity past. No beginning to that. Always been together. Even when the Word took on flesh and Jesus was on this planet, even then, so closely connected. Continually Jesus talking to the Father, talking about the Father, continually connected, the Father right there with him, always there at his beck and call. They're, even though separated by flesh, still connected as now as Father and as Son. And it was an ongoing process until, I believe, at this moment. And here's the culmination of it all. Jesus is on the cross. And he looks to his Father. Maybe even looks to him for deliverance. I don't believe that's it. I think it's just the idea of being there. But you see, Jesus has indeed become sin. Our sin. And in this moment, in all of eternity, he looks for support from his Father. And for whatever reasons, I believe Jesus felt the separation that sin causes. The separation from the Father. And you understand that? That's the first, that's the one, this is the one and only time in all of eternity Jesus can't find his Father. God, eternity past, eternity future, always connected. And in this moment, I believe the connection is broken. And God can't find God. I believe that was the worst moment. I believe that's why the mental was worse than the physical. This moment in time that had never happened before and will never happen again. It happened that day. And maybe that's why, and I think I said, maybe that's why I'm thankful for the moment when he finally died, so they could be together again. Not to mention, of course, the benefits that provides for us, but I'm just telling you. You know, I've thought of preaching a sermon when God couldn't find God. And I think as bad as that physical suffering was at the very moment, the culmination of all the physical abuse he'd gone through, hanging from, and so bad, so bad. But I believe this experience, this moment, is what sets Jesus apart from every other person to have ever lived. Y'all, there were a lot of people that were crucified on a cross. There were 2 that day right there with him. And I'm not making light of it. Don't misunderstand. But what I'm trying to do is take this suffering, this mental suffering, and allow it to rise so far above any physical hardship or suffering that mankind could ever go through. This was so far worse. Oh yeah, that's right. He did it for you. He did it for you. There's my case. There's my case. You don't have to agree. It doesn't even, I guess, doesn't even necessarily have to be true. It's true to me. And so I believe that Jesus suffered far more than most people realize, because I don't know if they've really thought about it. So I challenge you from this point on, when you think about the suffering of Jesus, dig in deep to how horrible the physical was, because it was. But don't ever leave out how horrific the mental side of it all was. I'm convinced it was worse. So I've had to add in this little segment. I'll let Jeremy handle that however he wants. Maybe this will be the intro to the great and exciting stuff that's coming soon. But obviously, I'm sorry for forgetting about it, Lord, but had to do it. Had to go back and make sure we understand. Okay? Love you guys a bunch. See you later.